Welcome back to the Real Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Swim, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you use the words forgiveness or letting go or releasing or even giving grace, all of us come to this time in our life or these experiences, whether personally or professionally, that we wrestle with this tension between the pain we've experienced and the peace we're wanting. We have this unresolved, unfinished business around forgiveness. In fact, over 60% of adults have reported that they want more forgiveness in their lives. They're just not sure how to go about getting it. So today I'm so excited that I get to introduce to you my guest, Ganel-Lyn Condie. Welcome to the show, Ganel.
Thanks for having me, Jenny.
It's such a privilege to have Ganel, and you'll know that as we get into the show and we talk together. But before we jump in, I want to just give you a proper introduction so everyone knows who they're talking to. Ganel-Lyn Condie is a motivational speaker known for her honesty, authenticity, and inspiring spirit. A summa cum laude graduate of Arizona State University with a degree in education and a minor in psychology, Ganel-Lyn has overcome a major chronic illness and is the mother of 2 miracle children. After the loss of her sister to suicide, she became a passionate mental health advocate, helping people find hope and prevention. Her work bridges diverse audiences from professionals to faith communities to marginalized populations. Ganel-Lyn is also a television, radio host, and author whose work has inspired thousands worldwide.
I love that intro. I think you should send me that edited bio. I need to reuse it.
Well, this is you. This is why it's so great, because it's
Oh,
you.
thanks, friend.
So one of the things that I really appreciate about your background is that you do speak to such diverse groups of people, right? You're calling in to consult for a business organization, and then you're talking to a faith community, and then you're at a prison, right?
Uh-huh.
Oftentimes we think of forgiveness as a faith-based principle, and we kind of leave it there. Why does it matter for leadership?
I love the premise of our topic today and just having a few weeks to noodle on it a little bit, because I do think forgiveness is a theme or a topic that can either trigger you. And I would just invite your listening audience that if it does trigger you, this topic, and you've avoided pushing play on this episode, that's a really great teacher. I mean, that's usually my first signal of oh, I've got something to look at there. So this is a really big issue. And what I'd like to say is, when you're looking at your phone and you see your battery level and you notice it's at 20, 30%, usually you're not panicked. You're okay, I've got it. I could finish this call. If your phone is getting older, 20 to 30% may run out really fast, right? And you may be all of a sudden I'm going to get kicked off this call or this video because the battery's too low. I would just say, when we talk about forgiveness, we have compounding pain as a society right now. We have headlines every day that feel really painful. And I don't think as humans we were designed to consume this much pain on an outside basis. Never mind your relationships at home, your relationships with family, extended family, and at work. I think one of the biggest reasons why forgiveness is worth discussing from either a leadership standpoint or a personal standpoint is that it drains your battery.
Yeah.
You keep ignoring that thing that you've got to forgive, or you've got to wrestle with to forgive, or you got to take the first steps to. And the reason I say it that way is it is a process. If you don't address it, it is draining your battery, and you don't have a full battery to function in all the other stewardships that you're being asked to show up in. So I would say that first and foremost it's the essential of self-care. And I don't think we talk about forgiveness as a self-care principle.
No, that's such a
And
good
I
point.
see it that way. I see it that when I am harboring hurt, or I'm nurturing pain, or I'm protecting my anger, in all of those ways, I am not fully able to bring all the power of my being to all these other places I want to be. And that's not to oversimplify it. It's not to say just get over it, just forgive. That's just to say, let's start there. But just realize that you deserve to lead your business, your family, your health from a place of optimum power.
Yeah.
And I have found that when I'm in a lot of pain, that at the root of that is a forgiveness problem. I'm not functioning at my best. I don't have all the bars showing up.
I think of it as internal noise. It leaves us kind of with this internal friction when we have that going
Mhm,
on, which does
mhm.
drain our battery so much
Yeah,
faster. So, I think we struggle to understand what forgiveness means. Like, how do we define forgiveness? I looked it up before, we talked today, and there's some interesting words like pardon, excuse, ignore, and I don't think that that's actually forgiveness. So I'd love to
I
really
swipe left.
define.
I swipe left on all of those, not
Yes.
swipe right. I
So
swipe
how
left.
how do you define forgiveness? Just so we're talking about it from the same place as we explore today.
You know, I I really have, I've lived through some really painful dynamics in my life. I'm not unique that way. If you're of a certain age and you've lived on the planet long enough, you probably have a story that you could share. And what I think forgiveness really is about is being able to tell that story and it doesn't drain me in the same way. It doesn't mean I
Mm,
retell the story and say, Yeah, I wasn't abused. No, I wasn't betrayed at work. I wasn't mistreated by that in that relationship. That's not what forgiveness is. It's not reframing the whole story as if that thing didn't happen.
yeah.
But it is saying, as the Stoics often talk about, forgiving others of their misdeeds over and over again, this gesture fosters inner ease.
Mhm, mhm.
Now, I say that with an asterisk, like footnote to that. If you find yourself in a relationship where the power dynamic is such that the person that is being abusive and hurting you has power over you in like a business role or even in a relationship where you live with that person, we have to talk about boundaries if we're going to talk about forgiveness. I think oftentimes we assume forgiveness looks like interacting or giving access to that person. And that's not true. I think it starts with here's forgiveness. And if you were to draw it out in a diagram, boundaries are down here and trust is down here. I think all of us have had that experience where something happens, there's a misunderstanding, you go through the muscle movement of forgiveness and you find yourself on the other side and you're like, oh, okay, things are better now. But that would be ridiculous if we defined forgiveness as that scenario. That's not where we're being asked to forgive. We're being asked to forgive in marriages, in long term business relationships,
Yeah.
in extended family relationships. Those are so layered. They have history. They have moments of this event and then the boundary reassessment. And then does it rebuild trust? Because sometimes when you go through the forgiveness exercise with someone, your trust actually grows. I mean, think of your spouse. I've been married almost 35 years. We've had to forgive each other for lots of things over the years.
Mhm.
If I want to stay in a relationship with him, that's required. We switch over to work. I just talked to someone the other day that had a blow up at work with a colleague. She was holding on to the anger and resentment. It was draining her battery. It went on for over a month. They were being cordial to each other, but you know that feeling. It's so icky. You show up at work and you're just like, oh, I hope they're not in the break room when I'm in the break room. And.
Yeah.
And so she had a conversation and said, if we're going to go forward and keep working together, there's a lot of stressors happening in the company right now. We're probably not functioning at our best. And she thought they had resolved it. They had a conversation. She realized she was going to let go of the hurt because she wanted a full battery measurement. A couple weeks pass, and he's still responding to her in a way that is signaling to her at some level he hasn't forgiven her.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
per your point at the beginning, it's an internal thing, not an external thing. Forgiveness doesn't require the other person to do anything
Right.
really. It requires you to do the thing.
Right. So in that same scenario, this coworker, this woman who confided in me and asked for some advice, said, "What do I do?" I said, "Well, then you get to go back to where your boundaries are with this person because obviously you've done the lifting on your side. but there's agency on his side. You don't get to go and invite him to go talk to his therapist or talk to his personal professional coach. You don't get to invite him to go journal unless you feel prompted,
Yeah.
right? You don't get to tell him all the tools that you have used to
Yeah.
help you move forward through this. So now you get to look at this relationship and where the trust is and where the boundaries are, and that's what she has control over, right? If he's going to stay angry, if he's going to stay with resentment, if he's going to stay holding on to some story that he has told himself about her, we don't get to control the stories people tell themselves about us. We only get to control the story, as the Stoics say, that we're telling ourselves. And what stories and exercises are we willing to go through so that there's greater ease in our hearts, so that our battery pack is fully charged? And I say that sensitively because on a personal level with you, I've called you over the how many years, almost 10 years of
It
friendship?
feels like forever.
Yeah. There are certain things we've talked about 2,000 times. I mean, I think that's an accurate count. 2,000 times probably. Same relationship, same scenario, same hurt. I adjust a boundary, you share a perspective. I think having outside auditors when there's compounding pain and compounding trauma in certain
Mhm.
relationships is essential. It is not a one time and we're done. And if you value still being in a relationship with that person, you have to realize that the boundaries can always shift. And I think boundaries are not often talked about when we talk about forgiveness.
So let me anchor a few things and then I want to go
Yeah,
there because what I'm hearing you say is that forgiveness is a letting go of anger and resentment on your own end. Is that what I was hearing?
it's a process of doing that.
A process of doing that. Yeah, because we're not like, okay, well, just throw that off.
Switch,
Yeah,
switch
just turn
on,
the
off.
switch off. Not
Yeah,
easy. Onion
no,
approach. Okay.
no.
And then I also heard you saying sometimes we have this idea of what forgiveness is.
Yeah.
And then what is real forgiveness? So let's pause there. And will you just take us through what sometimes we think forgiveness is and what it looks like and what it actually looks like in your experience?
Well, in the situation I shared about my own personal relationship, I I feel like if I was around this individual, I would probably have feelings come up.
Okay.
That is not a signal that I haven't forgiven them. It is a signal that I've had experiences of that were very painful, very abusive in the past. So my nervous system is registering that. But I can also talk about that person and I don't have this charge. I'm not over here using a whole bunch of energy, like mentally, emotionally, and spiritually processing this relationship. That's also a signal to me that I've forgiven, right?
Okay. Yeah.
In my soul, when I'm sitting in meditation or prayer or journaling or talking to someone else that knows this person, I'm not trapped.
Yeah.
I'm not trapped into some anger. I'm not trapped into, I need to be understood. And so that's the other part of forgiveness is that we really, as humans, want to be understood. I have very rarely met a human that doesn't just want to be heard and understood.
Yeah.
But if you're waiting for the other person that hurt you to reflect back to you that they understand, they validate, and they take responsibility, that means that other person that you happen to have a conflict with has done their own work.
Yeah.
And we don't get to be on the planet or in families or go to work with people that only have done their work, that listen to the Real Intelligence podcast, right? But let's be real. We're forgiving people that may never apologize. We're
Yeah.
forgiving people that will never have the self-awareness to acknowledge that they caused harm. We're forgiving people that we still have to function with and go to work with. And unless it feels really physically and mentally unsafe, to the point where you remove yourself from the job, it is about taking back some power. So you're forgiving while still having to show up in a painful situation. It's giving yourself permission to say, how am I going to see my own pain and acknowledge my own story? And maybe hire someone to reflect that back to me and then show back up in that relationship with tools. Not forgiving in that situation looks like avoidance sometimes. It looks like getting small. It looks like getting really big and angry. right? We can sometimes talk about what something is by saying what it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what it's not is it's not kumbaya, it's not matching Christmas pajamas and that card that we send out to everyone saying, "Look how great everything is."
Mhm.
And then you meet the people that are so burdened down. They have 50 years of not forgiving. On a physical level, that shows up in your health. That shows up in lots of ways. I mean, there's interesting studies that have been done about what shows up in your physical being when you don't forgive. And then the opposite of that would be the great Viktor Frankl, who lived in a concentration camp and survived physically because of how he functioned in gratitude and forgiveness. I don't think Corrie ten Boom or Viktor Frankl ever said, and the Holocaust wasn't really as bad as we thought. It was fine. It w The concentration camps were a little bad, but not, and we think that we think the only way to jump through the hoops to get to forgiveness is either reframe the story as not that big of a deal or giving access. And I would just say, let's open the field up.
I think you're right on that we misperceive it and we put this pressure on ourselves. I love that permission to be able to go into a situation with someone who you have experienced pain with and still have feelings come up. That doesn't mean you haven't engaged in forgiveness. What's really landing with me from what you've shared is I know I'm forgiving or in that process of forgiving if I'm recognizing honestly what's happened, right? I'm not trying to minimize that. I'm not trying to reframe that away, but I'm also not charged by it.
Mhm.
That it's not taking up so much of my energy that I'm able to kind of hold both, which is advanced to be able to hold these opposite type feelings.
Yeah, the paradox of that.
Yeah, there's great paradox in that. So to me, that was really grounding how both how both can be there.
If you've done any kind of self-awareness, intelligence work, you've had the experience of where you thought you had forgiven. You thought
Yes.
you had done a full completion of the cycle, right? And then all of a sudden something happens and you almost feel like you're at square one. That is not a signal that you didn't forgive. It could be an invitation to recognize your own growth. And then another truth that I have found is that sometimes it's then my soul, my spirit, my heart is ready to look at the scenario from a different angle, and there is something new to address and forgive.
Yeah.
And so, that doesn't feel great because it's not you're at square one, it's just an invitation to look at it again. And that means this human experience of mortality is messy and it's ongoing. And so often we think forgiveness is a destination on the map.
Yeah.
It's I think it's a lens, I think it's a battery, I think it's a compass, it's a feeling, it's so many things, but it's not a destination.
That's such a generous stance to take, and as I was looking at different faith traditions, like, how do different groups
Yes,
process forgiveness?
yes.
Some of what I found was it's this idea of coming back to that internal balance, rebalancing. So, we can offer it and we come to this place of balance and then something else hits us, right? Because we're ready for that learning, we're ready to address that. I think oftentimes the body and our minds are only willing to open up as much as it's safe to open up, right? To
Uh-huh.
do that healing work. And so maybe we weren't ready for that full work in 2012, but we are ready now.
It is generous. It
Yeah.
is generous. It's generous to allow your own sense of self to grow and change.
Yes.
But have you ever been around people that don't let others change? Like, I don't know any long-term relationship that is gonna stand if there's not some growth and fluidity built in. If there's too much rigidity in anything we're doing, it doesn't allow for the human experience and the learning that comes from the human experience. And so to me, forgiveness is an active word, it's an action word, it's, um, it's also a tool, and I think there's often, as you were just speaking, moments where I can look at a relationship and I feel pain. The next step for me, usually my default response, my MO, is a fixer.
Yeah.
So I think be warned. I do not want any of your listeners to weaponize their own compassion and assume that that reconciliation is the goal and forgiveness is the tool you have to keep using. You may look at a relationship and you've done all the heavy lifting, processing, generous assumptions, curiosity, growth, grace. I'm thinking of all the words.
Mm-hmm.
And the other person has sat down on the side of the road and said, I think I'm going to stay right here in my anger and my story. It, be careful that forgiveness is not necessarily always the tool in the toolbox you have to reach for. And I know
Yeah.
that's our theme today, but what if radical acceptance is? What if curiosity is? What if being an observer of that relationship is the tool you pick up today?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to, in essence, set it down. I think that if I say that to your audience and I can feel it in my own life, sometimes you've turned it over 50 times, you've washed it, you've polished it, you've painted it, you've done all the forgiveness stuff you can possibly do to this fill in the gap relationship situation. And there comes a point where you just get to put it down. You get to set that that whole situation, and I say that with sensitivity because if it's a relationship that's ongoing, if it's someone you still have interactions with, right? That there's something about the timing of
Yeah.
setting something down that I think just be aware if you pick it up again in the future, because either it's time for you to look at it again or you're just triggered because you're remembering. But can you check in with your heart? Does it feel like you're giving power to that situation at the same level, at the same charge? If you can say, no, I'm not, that's forgiveness too.
I would just want to highlight that question. That's a really great takeaway question, just to self assess, to check in with yourself. Am I giving power to this
Yeah.
situation? Like giving it away. I'm also, when you said sometimes we just need to set it down, I took a breath.
Uh-huh. I
My
felt that.
body,
Yeah.
like, took a breath, and I think what I'm appreciating is the compassion and grace for us, because sometimes we're so willing to give forgiveness, or we want to, that we forget that we need some of that space. We need that room to grow and change. We need, that grace offered, that letting go, if you will, offered to us for a time, that we're matching what our system is ready for and able to do. Our intentions are good. And I think we have to honor that we do intend for these things, if we do, right? We have to ask ourselves honestly, note those intentions, but then also give that space to decide, is this something to pick up right now or not? Do I have capacity?
Yeah, and from a Buddhist standpoint, the Buddhists are really beautiful about staying very present and intentional. And I think the lesson from that is you can only have so much in the present moment, right? You cannot be
Yeah.
yesterday, 12 years ago. You can't. You
Carry it
can't.
all at the same
It,
time.
right. If you look at the Christian philosophy and teachings, and when we're commanded to forgive 70 times 7, right? It's a pretty it's a pretty tall order. Why? When you were just speaking now, what came to mind is you can't give what you don't have. And if you're not practicing forgiveness for self, you probably struggle to give forgiveness to others. So I believe in the Christian tradition that when God is asking us to forgive 70 times 7, he's not saying the Holocaust wasn't bad. He's not saying that abusive marriage wasn't horrible. He's not saying that coworker that lied and took credit for your project and now has the promotion that you should have gotten isn't bad.
Yeah.
He's saying when you keep practicing this principle, you will have more power. You will have more bandwidth. You will have more ability to move through and forward in life. And if you haven't practiced forgiving yourself, you won't even know what to give. So when I see people that are really, you can feel it. You can feel when you're around certain people that this is their Achilles heel. This is their thing that that challenges them maybe the most in the top 3 maybe of
Forgiveness, forgiving people.
forgiveness. What they lead out with is maybe complaining or criticizing or correcting others all the time and They can tell you all the things that are going wrong in the world, in politics, in the business, in your church community, whatever. But if you really sit with them and they allow you to kind of sense their insecurities, those generally have been the people I have found that don't give themselves grace at all. If you're working with someone at work or you are engaging with someone at home or in your extended family that are difficult in that way, one way you can have some generous assumptions about them is, oh my gosh, that signal is a signal of how hard they are on them. And that allows you to pull compassion up instead of frustration every time you're around. So when we talk about forgiveness, you can only give it away if you're practicing it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And really, I mean, I do believe in my own faith tradition, God, every time I'm trying to work on a characteristic or a principle or a habit, he gives me chances to practice that. He doesn't just deliver it on Amazon. Like I don't just open a
Yeah.
box of forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
I get to
Unfortunately,
practice.
we get to exercise the muscles.
My son called me the other day and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing my favorite thing. I'm cleaning out my closet." And it is one of my favorite things to donate to the local. We have an organization here that I love to donate to. He said, "Don't you love it?" I said, "I love it. I love it so much." It just like I love creating space and I love creating order. I've been that way since a little girl. And my abundance comes from giving it away. What if we looked at forgiveness that way? Like maybe that's not your happy place to go through a closet and give stuff away. But if it is, and yet you pull down off the shelf this really painful situation you're dealing with that really is hurtful, that has caused you great harm, where can you donate and give away parts of that story under the umbrella of forgiveness?
Yeah.
And if you do happen to love, editing your house like I like to do, um, why do you like that? You like that feeling because it creates space. That's why I like it. I like it because it feels simple and it feels like space. And it also feels like it's a gift to someone else that I don't even know. Well, that's what forgiveness is. It's editing down, it's creating space, it's giving away for someone they don't even know that maybe they've hurt you. Maybe forgiveness for you right now is not like glaring in your face because it's like a bleeding wound. Maybe forgiveness for you is more a scar and you're looking at it again because you bumped it the other day and it hurts a little bit and you're pulling it back up to your frontal cortex because you're like, what's going on there? Why does that feel a little stingy? Um, I would just say maybe there's something you can donate, a sweater you're not wearing anymore. I don't know.
So I love the metaphor of that. And if someone's thinking, "Well, I don't know how to give this away. I
Yeah.
don't know," and we use the words at the beginning, it's a process, right? It's not just
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I found a hurt, and I'm gonna put it on the table, and I won't have it anymore," right? That's not how it works. But if someone were to say, "I found something, I did bump that scar, or I did pull something really painful off the shelf," what are some things you've seen in your experience that can help people move in that direction to give that up, to let that go, to lay that down?
Well, I love the analogy. I've used it a lot in mental health education when I teach about mental health specifically, is that you get big toolboxes. I think we as humans want the one tool. We want the magic wrench that does all the forgiving and all the healing. I love this question to highlight some of the tools that you may want to add to your box. I think journaling is a really good first start.
Yeah.
It's very solitary.
Yeah.
This is not the journal you're gonna pass on. This is the journal you throw away when you fill it up or burn it. I burn mine sometimes, right? Just symbolically. You process free journaling, and the Stoics did this a lot. It's been known really effectively for leaders that like brain dump on the regular, like that's just an appointment every day. So I would say start there. If you have the resources and you can hire a coach or you can hire a therapist and it's a trauma, it's a betrayal trauma or PTSD that's complex, I am not oversimplifying that journaling is going to help that, right? We've got some people in your audience that have lived through some compounding
Yeah.
trauma,
Yeah.
and that requires and deserves an outside helper besides what's going on in here. I think meditation and prayer, there's some really great guided meditations for free on lots of free apps, right? I think a conversation directly with the person is one of the steps. It's not the only step, and sometimes it's not possible. I think if you look at forgiveness as more a charcuterie board instead of like it's a 3-ingredient pie that only looks like conversation, resolution, and access, well, that does happen, but it doesn't always happen.
So are you saying that in our personal or professional lives, we can forgive without having resolution in the
Yes,
relationship?
yes.
Okay, I just
And I
want
think,
everyone to listen to that for a moment. Like, just
yes,
feel that for a second, because that
yes.
is really different than I think we consider and think about forgiveness.
Because ultimately, we have no control over anyone else.
Yeah.
So if we are waiting to get through the process, and it is a process of forgiveness based on an exterior signal from somebody else, you're less likely to get there.
Yeah.
If you redefine forgiveness as an internal work that sometimes involves reconciliation, continued relationship, and access, great. And to me, it's reconciliation of self and it's reconciliation with your higher power, right? That's what forgiveness leads to. Forgiveness really is reconciliation, but it's not an external.
Mhm.
It's a reconciliation of self. It's a rebalancing of ease, as the Stoics say, within self.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that changes how you show up.
So, as we kind of round things out today, I feel like there's so much to chew on, and I'm sure the
Yes.
listeners today are really probably grabbing on to whatever that piece is for them, whatever's resonating for them. If someone were to come to you, right, and say, Ganel-Lyn, what you've said today is really great, and I love all the metaphors, and I want to have charcuterie with you, but I'm really, really this has been so hard. This has been so painful. I don't know what to do next. Whether it's a in business setting, private setting, whatever that is. What is your message to that person?
First and foremost, find a place to have your pain feel seen and heard. And that, like I've already said, could be journaling, it could be a therapist, can be a trusted friend that is just going to sit with you in the pain. Because you can't move to the whatever next step unless you acknowledge it. And oftentimes, I want to skip over that part because I just want to be in resolution. And I have found we're not honoring our grief, we're not honoring our pain when we do that. It's real. So stay in that space as long as you need. Don't stay there so long that you camp out and live forever.
Yeah.
Right. Right. No one can tell you what that moment is that it's
Mhm.
been too long.
Mhm.
But I think we have a felt sense of it. The next step is then what do you need to move forward? What clarity do you need? Because if it's only dependent on someone else, that is not a stewardship mindset, and that's very powerless feeling.
Yeah.
It's external, it's dependent. And so decide in that step. And then the next step would be writing a letter to yourself of how you want to feel. Have you gotten an unrealistic expectation that you want to feel never bothered by it,
Yeah.
never hurt by it, never triggered by it, never sad by it? Well, then that must mean you stopped having feelings. And if you're in an ongoing relationship that has been painful, give yourself permission. I cannot say this enough to adjust boundaries. The only way you know you need to adjust a boundary is you get them triggered. That's the way you know. So it's not like you did it wrong. It's that you have now additional information. This is my last bomb I'm going to drop. Connection stays high, control stays low.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, when we are not in forgiveness and we're in a lot of fear and there's really low trust, control goes high.
Yeah.
And what I think ideally we're all hoping to be as whole people is to bring our whole selves. And our whole self includes more connection and less control. Because I really have no control over you. I have no control over my kids. I have no control over my spouse. I have no control over the drive around the freeway. I have control how I respond to
Yeah, and back to what you said about connection to self, connection to source. that staying high, even if the connection with that other person isn't how you wish it could be, right?
I love the idea of what do you have control over? Connection with self. What do you have control over? Connection with source. What do you have control over? Your own forgiveness muscles and building them, whatever that looks like.
One of my favorite quotes you say is offerings, not outcomes.
Offerings, not outcomes.
And I think you bring it to such a beautiful conclusion for us today, because at the end of the day, forgiveness is really about living from your own values and living from the place of integrity, integral meaning whole, right? That I am living
Yep.
from that place of wholeness in myself and I'm coming back to that place of balance. Thank you so much for sharing with us. There were so many gems here to take, and, you know, I certainly am taking away my own gems. Hopefully everyone will be taking away maybe different ones. If people are thinking, like I often do, wow, she knows so much. I love how she speaks to me. I'd love to learn more. I'd love to connect with her. I will drop those links, of course, in this podcast. But is there a place where people can go, where you suggest they go to hear more from you or to kind of access more of what you're offering or putting out in the world?
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for this conversation because I think these really abstract concepts like forgiveness is very abstract and very complex. We don't always have language around those complex concepts. But I would love to hear from your listeners. So the easiest way is my website has all the links, but I'm on all the platforms. What's great about having a strange name that's so unique that no one has is no one has it. So Google will tell you where to find me pretty fast because you just start typing in Ganel and usually all those places show up. But if you don't want to try to chase me down, just go to my website, which is Ganel-Lyn.com.
Ganel-Lyn
Thanks for
Condie,
having me.
thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and for your deep wisdom and your heart and your insight all around this topic of forgiveness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today. If this episode was helpful to you, please pass it along to someone else who might find similar benefit. Until we meet again.